Oh, that is not at all what are you guys seeing intro to racing or team racing?
We see intro to racing.
Okay, beautiful. All right, so I guess we will we're gonna jump into this. So intro to racing, like I said, just to be everything to know. It's gonna be a pretty big crash course, I'll admit. But I think it's all very valuable information. We'll have questions at the end. Please call out and ask any questions you have in the moment. It'll also be on our YouTube page. So if you would like to, so if you would like to rewatch this, I highly recommend doing so that you can have it all, locked down for this weekend. But to start off, it's just going to be a quick review of what Ryan discussed last week. We're going to start off with our points of sale. So if you don't know, we have our what's called our sail clock here. And the boat can point into all these directions here, with the exception of the one directly into the wind. That's what we call being in irons. You're essentially just pointing your boat directly up into the wind. Your sails are acting like a flag. They're just going to be flapping. You're not going to be moving anywhere. So the highest we can sail up into the wind is called close hauled. And close hauled is about 40 to 45 degrees or so into the wind. That's how you're going to be sailing for about half of the race this weekend.
I don't want to scare you, but just try to like prepare yourself. I'm only going for an hour, and then I got so
There we go. So close haul, when you're close haul, you're pulling in the sails as much as you can. So the jib is ideally going to have the foot or the bottom of its sail just starting to touch the hull of the boat. That's how you have it pulled in all the way when you're close hauled. And the mainsail, the back corner of your mainsail, you want to have in the back corner of your boat. So they're pulled in nice and tight. As you can notice here on our sail clock, the more you sail downwind on the clock, the more you're letting your sails out. So when you're running, they are out perpendicular to the boat. You are essentially letting them act like a kite. So just, you can see that as you turn up, again, they get pulled in more. The reaching angles are the ones in between. So you have close reach, beam reach is perpendicular, and broad reach. And in this instance, instead of trying to sail based on the wind, you're trying to sail to a certain location. You know where you want to go, so you need to adjust your sails to match that. And you use what's called Telltales, which will be on the next slide. And the goal is to always have your Telltales streaming on your boat. Telltales are going to be these little pieces of yarn that you're going to, or generally they're yarn on the front of your sail. And the goal is to always have those streaming or laying flat against the sail. You don't want to have one flapping or, or not flat against, or not streaming, I guess is the word. So keeping those flat. When you're running, remember, we're not pulling our sails, we're letting them out. You're letting them act like a kite, like I always say. Keep them nice and full. When you're in wing on wing, you want a little bit of heel, or what we call tilt or heel, towards the jib, our forward sail. And if it starts to collapse at all, that means you need to turn your tiller, your little steering stick in the back, towards the jib so that you can head down a little bit more. We'll talk about all of that more, a little bit more. All of that a little bit more in a second. Just quick review. So having looked at our sail clock, we have to do some maneuvers in order to move our boat around. Otherwise, we'll be going in a straight line the whole time. And we have two major ones called a tack and a jibe, and they are characterized based on where you're turning in relation to the wind. A tack is an upwind turn. So if you look at this one on the left, the boat is at a close haul. He's turning his boat to the left. And the important part is that the sails are switching sides when you do this, right? So he has his sails on the right side. His tack goes to the tack layer on the left, of the port side. Jibing is the opposite. When you're sailing downwind, you have your sails out, right? You're going to do your turn, sails switch side, and you're doing a downwind maneuver, unlike upwind. So you'd be going from about like a broad reach or so through a run down to another broad reach. And like I said, it's characterized by your sails switching sides. Next up is I'm going to revisit Telltales really fast. So if you look at this real picture, not my Microsoft Paint drawing, but the real picture right here, this is what Telltales should look like, right? They're streaming against the sail. That it basically, my aerospace kids can do a better explanation than I can, but that means that the airflow over your sail is effective. Your sails are happy, as I like to say, a little bit easier to understand, and you're maximizing the efficiency of how they'll be able to move your boat. If you look at this overhead viewpoint of this boat right here, you can see that it's kind of sailing pretty high into the wind. He's not, 40 to 45 degrees off like we would normally say. He's a little too high into the wind. And so this right here would be what his telltales would look like. This dotted one means that it's the one on the outside, and the one right here that is green is going to be his telltale on the inside. So if he's sailing too high up into the wind, the rule of thumb is that you want to turn your tiller, which is again our little steering stick in the back, towards where the telltales are flapping. So if in this case you're sailing too far up into the wind, you want to turn your tiller. These two guys are the little sailors. You're going to pull your tiller towards you, and you're going to turn downwind a little bit to the right so that you can find that 45-degree angle happy spot where your sails are pulled in tight off the wind. And that's always your goal. Let's see, that's what's called our groove. When we're finding that line on that 45, we call it our groove. And it is working assuming your sail is pulled in tight, right? So when we're up close haul going upwind, our sails are pulled in tight. They're not moving, but we are moving our boat to adjust to where it wants to be in relation to the wind. However, when you're reaching, like I said, your destination sailing, you're not sailing based on where the wind is, but you want to go to a certain location and you want to adjust your sails accordingly. You can once again use the telltales and trim, or trim is just another word for adjust, towards where the flapping telltales are. So if the inside telltale is flapping, that means I'm going to pull in my sail a little bit. The outside telltale is flapping, that means I'm going to let out my sail a little bit. And again, goal is to just have those streamlined. Does anybody have any questions or anything so far about what we've discussed? No? All right, awesome. Next up is we're going to talk a little bit about rules of the road. This will be super important, especially at your starts, which we'll get into. But the first thing I'm going to discuss is starboard versus port. So sailing has a word for pretty much everything, just because they always do, and it's annoying. But starboard and port are ways you can describe right and left. Starboard is just another word for right. Port is for left. The way I always told my students was that port has 4 letters, so does left. So that's a good way to remember. But eventually, you'll just get used to knowing that. And when two boats are coming at each other, they are going to be on opposite tacks, which I'll just talk about in a second. And one of them is always going to be the stand-on vessel. They're going to be the one that's, that has the right of way, gets to continue sailing, and the other one must move out of the way. And so what a tack is, I know I just said a tack is an upwind maneuver. There's a couple other words for tack. It's also corner of a sail, but it is also a way to describe a boat's course. So if you look at these two boats right here, one boat is on a port tack, the other is on a starboard tack. And the way that you can look at that is your tack is the opposite of where your sail currently lies on the boat. So if you look at our red boat, the sail or the wind is coming from the left or port side and pushing its sail onto the right. So because the sail is on the right or starboard side, they are on a port tack, which is opposite of where their sail lies. It can also be imagined as the side of the boat where the wind hits first. We'll talk about that why it gets a little tricky in a second in downwind sailing. But in that case, you can think of it as the direction of where your boom is pointing. And so, like I said, if these two boats are coming at each other, the starboard boat always is going to have rights over the port boat. So what happens is when you guys are on the water, a lot of times it's hard to see with the sails in the way. And so if you're the starboard boat, you want to keep sailing. You don't want to move out of the way. You're yelling at the port boat, starboard, starboard, and they are obligated to move out of the way for you. All right, because our goal is always to avoid collisions at all costs. Even if you are in the right, you want to try to avoid collisions. So you're yelling at them, hey, get out of the way. If they don't, we're going to talk about penalties in a sec. If they don't, you're allowed to protest and all that stuff. But your goal, just try to yell at them, try to get their attention, let them know you got to move. If you are the port boat, you either have to tack away or duck them. But I think that is on the next slide, right? Oh, this is downwind sailing. Like I said, it's normally where the wind is hitting your boat first. However, if you are downwind sailing on a run like this, and you would say, hey, the wind is hitting the back of my boat first. Well, this is where you can use a trick where your boom is pointing towards the tack that you're on. So boat number 3, for example, the sails lie on the starboard side of the boat, and the opposite of that is port. So he's on a port tack. Number 4 is on a starboard tack. So that means that if they were slightly going to tap or at all have any sort of bumps, 3 is obligated to move out of the way for 4. And yeah, let's move on. Like I said, if 2 boats are approaching on opposite tacks, port must move out of the way. So in this case, you can see that they're ducking the starboard boat or they could tack. But you're always obligated to avoid collision. Keep that in mind. Next up, we're going to talk about windward leeward. So this is a way of describing being either upwind or downwind of a given object in sailing. Pretty straightforward. If you are windward, that is the windward side of said object. If you are leeward, you are on the downwind side of said object. So in this diagram, we have our boat. There's a windward side where the wind is coming from, and there's a leeward side where the wind is going downwind of the object. And that's an important concept to understand, because when 2 boats are on the same tack, the leeward boat is always going to have rights over the windward boat. They will be the stand-on vessel. So in our previous example, right, we had a boat that was on starboard, we had a boat that was on port. They were coming at each other. If you have 2 boats that are both riding the same angle, one of them is naturally going to be farther upwind than the other. In this case, it is the one labeled W. And so the leeward boat is going to have right of way over the windward boat. And so, you'd be yelling, hey, I'm leeward. If you're about to crash, I'm leeward, you got to move out of my way. Once again, you are obligated to always avoid collisions. So that doesn't mean that this leeward boat can just turn up into the windward boat and crash with them and say, oh, it's your fault because I'm leeward. They have to, be vocal, let them know I'm leeward. Yeah, move out of my way. Any other question or any questions so far before I move on? Just about rules? Nothing. All right, sweet. When a penalty occurs, there aren't, in this form of racing and fleet racing, there aren't going to be people, umpires checking on you. So you have to be the one to physically raise your hand, yell, protest, say, hey, you got to do your spins, you're in the wrong. There won't be someone there to double check on it. And if a penalty does happen to you, it's committed against you, the punishment is to do a 720 in fleet racing, which means you got to do 2 full circles, 360 before you can continue racing. And then once that's clear, you can sail on. I already said how they happen. Sorry, I took like half of this PowerPoint from another PowerPoint I did, but next up, we're just going to quickly talk about the course that you'll be going around. The course is always going to be in line with the wind. If it's set well, the buoys are going to be in line with the wind, and the start and finish line is going to be perpendicular to the wind. So if you see that in our example here, we have our start finish line. It is perpendicular to this arrow where the wind is coming down from. And at one end of the start and finish line, you'll have what's called our committee boat. They are going to be one side of it, and the other end is going to have either a flag or a buoy, and that is what's referred to as the pin, and that's going to form your line. Above that are going to be 2 gates, which we'll talk about in a second, and then above that, way up the course is going to be what's called our windward mark, or some people call it the weather mark, with a little offset. You're just going to group those together when we talk about sailing courses, pretend they're the same thing. The offset is just a way to keep boats out of the way when people do roundings. And the way it works is you're going to start your race, which we'll discuss. You'll tack your way, zigzag up and up the course. You're going to round it always to leaving the mark to port or your left side of your boat. And you're going to come downwind. And then these 2 marks right here are going to turn into a gate. So you can choose which one to go around, which one to round, and then tack your way back up. You'll do that as many times as designated by the race committee. and then your start line will also become your finish line. What this means by W, even number of legs, is the courses can often be described as the number of legs that you will be sailing. A leg is a course you take to a given mark. So I think the next slide right here, if you look on our left, that's just your upwind leg, right? You're tacking your way up. If you look on the right, it's your downwind leg. You are just going downwind. So this would be one lap, but 2 legs, right? Up and down through your gate is one full lap, but 2 legs. So if we go back this way, let's say that there is a W4. That means there's going to be 4 legs. They'll be there first upwind, first downwind, go around the gate, first upwind, and then on the second one, you're going to ignore the gate, pretend it's not there, and you're going to sail through the finish line. So a W4 is 2 laps. You can just kind of divide by 2. A W6 will be 3 laps, depending on the wind, size of the course. And the race committee will let you know before you guys start racing. But it's something that you have to keep in mind because you got to keep track of how many you've done so far. Hopefully, you know, if you're a good Cal Poly racer, you're in first place and you're not playing follow the leader. So you got to know when to go through the finish line. But like I said, if we apply what we talked about, not going directly into the wind, you can only go 45 degrees into the wind. You'll have to zigzag your way up the course like we see on the left. You can sail downwind, use those gates and choose your side. And then repeat that. Next up. So we're going to quickly talk about starts. So the way starts work is we have that line I talked about, right? Where there is a committee boat on one side that will generally always be on the course right side, and there's going to be a pin on the other end. And the way sailing starts work is you are given some amount of time to figure out where you want to be, get situated, and then at the start you want to be moving with speed across the line but not over it. And in collegiate racing, we do 3-minute starts. The race committee, the people on that boat on the right side, are going to be sitting there with either a whistle or they also have these boxes that use horns. And they're going to do multiple blows to get your attention, like burr, burr, burr. And then the way they'll start the race is they're going to do 3 long ones. And at the start of that first horn, to denote 3 minutes, you start your watch. They're going to then give you 2 long ones for 2 minutes until the start. We'll do 1 long one with 3 short ones for 1:30 and so on until they get to the last 5 seconds. They will count out with 5 horns on each second. And the last one will be a long horn, and that'll mean the race has begun. Again, you want to hopefully you're sailing around, but hopefully you have speed, you're on the line. We can talk a little bit about why these guys are crossed out. If we look at our leftmost one here with the line through it, if you remember earlier, we talked about starboard and port, and a boat on starboard tack is always going to have right away over a boat on port. So generally I'm just going to say, yes, always start your race on a starboard tack, right? So everyone's going to be lined up. They're all going to be on a starboard tack. All of their sails are going to be on the left or port side of the boat. If you are on a port tack, you essentially have to either squeeze in on that left side or you have to duck the entire fleet. And by ducking the entire fleet, you're instantly in last place already. We won't worry about anything else for now. I'd say always start on starboard for this weekend. This boat in the middle of the line with the little squiggly line next to him, he is over the line. We're just going to say at the start, he has, let's say, half of his boat across the line when it hits 0. You guys are all going to have a big number on your sail up there when you're racing this weekend. And so what will happen is there'll be someone on the bullhorn on the race committee after 0 calling out numbers of everybody that's over. If you were over early, you have to duck the line and pop back up. You must completely come underneath it and clear your boat before you can head back upwind in order to erase your being over early. This guy down here on the bottom, he's just too far away. If it's at 0 and you're that far away, you're so far behind. So make sure you're hanging out, near the line during the sequence, so that you're ready to go when it starts. This boat all the way here on the right that I've crossed out, He's doing what's trying to called bar. He's trying to do what's called barging. And as you can see, there's no room for him to get in. He's going to try and squeeze in, but he shouldn't. And that is because if you remember, we talked about two boats being on the same tack. Both these boats are on starboard. The leeward boat is always going to have right of way. So this boat just below the committee boat is defending that spot. If the other one tries to squeeze in there and there's a tap or collision, then he is violating that rule. So you don't want to be there either. Keep that in mind. And that is how starts work. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about tactics. This is an exaggerated picture just so you can get a good idea of it. But when you're starting, you're going to basically try and choose where you want to start on the line, right? Do I want to be on the boat side? Do I want to be on the pin side? These lines are normally, hundreds of feet long. I know it looks like it's only like 3 or 4 boat lengths long, and that was for the sake of my drawing, but they're going to be very long lines. And so you can choose which side do I want to be on. And one of the ways that you can decide this is looking at your marks and figuring out if one is farther upwind than the other. And like I said, this is exaggerated, but if you can see, the committee boat is set up farther upwind than the pin is. So if I am the boat on the right, I am already starting my race farther upwind than the boat on the left. All right, so a lot of what sailing is being able to see that stuff beforehand, set up where you want to be, and be able to start your race well. So in this instance, I want to be that boat on the right. I want to be starting over there because I'm already ahead of the boat on the left when it hits 0. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Next up is a fun one. We're going to talk about headers and lifts. So if you remember, we talked about you can only sail 40 to 45 degrees into the wind. I think I made that a little too big, but you get the idea. And part of what racing is not only being able to start well, do your tacks well and all that, but knowing when to. And so a lot of times wind is just naturally going to want to shift throughout the race. On some parts of the course on the right side, you'll be lifted, or on the left side, or, wind is not consistent. So you want to look for big puffs where it'll make you go faster, but you also want to look for a lift or a header and see if you can have a more direct route up the course. If you remember, when we are sailing upwind, we are keeping our sails where they are, nice and tight, pulled in at close haul, but you're adjusting your boat in order to find that groove or that sweet spot. So if they start flapping, like I said, tiller towards where the telltale is. We'll talk about that right here. A lift, again, these are exaggerated, is when you're able to point higher up the course than you were. So assuming this one on the left, assuming our course is set up perfectly, our start line and wind are all perpendicular, looking good like that, you zigzag your way up. But if there's a huge shift, and again, this is exaggerated, and the wind shifts to the right, this boat can now point, 20 or so, or maybe not, but like 20 or so degrees higher up the course, and they're going to have a faster route up the course. If you guys are 10 degrees apart, off the line, it may take a while, but over the course of an entire leg, it's going to pay off to be pointing higher. So you always want to look for those shifts so that you can sail faster or sail a more direct route to the windward mark. And then same thing for headers. If I am again on the left and it's a squared course, everything is good, I'm sailing along, but the wind shifts the other direction. Next thing I know, I am sailing farther downwind, right? I am sailing more to the left. And I have a less direct route towards the windward mark. But the cool thing about every header is that if you tack, it becomes a lift. So just like in this one right here, he's being headed, but if he tacks, now he's on the lifted course. Oh, his sail's on the wrong side, ignore that. He's on a lifted course, and he is again on a more direct route towards the windward mark. All right. Cool. That was it. Again, I know that was a lot, and I apologize. It was just trying to get everything jammed in there that you need to know for racing. Does anybody have any questions, or do any returning seasoned experienced racers want to shout something out that I might have missed or anything. It was a lot of information. I apologize for that, but I just want to make sure it was all there.
There's a question in the chat. How many boats will be at the start?
That's a great question. Depending on the fleet, could be anywhere. I'd say this regatta, anywhere from 12 to 20, maybe. Or I guess, Kai, you know the numbers. What's it going to look like? Oh, I think you might have me muted. All right, that's fine. Yeah.
There's 16
Okay,
max.
perfect. Yeah, it depends on the fleet, but at this regatta, 16 max. And yeah, let's see what else. Do they often do eye flags or black flags? It's a great question. Eye flags will be a thing. I forgot to mention that. Sam is on it. We have our line. We're gonna have a flag here. We're gonna have our boat. So what happens is if there's there repeatedly starts where everybody is over early, they'll do what's called a general recall. They will shout out in the megaphone, general recall. That means that all that is just a restart. There's too many people over the line for the race committee to really tell what those individual boats were. And so they're going to say general recall, and that means that you start over. So what they might do is they might throw up an eye flag. And what it looks like is it is going to be a flag like this. I believe it's yellow with a black circle in the middle. I believe it's yellow, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. All right. It's going to be yellow with a little black circle in the middle. All right. And that is your eye flag. And what that means is that if they put that up, you do a start and it's 0 and you're over early like this, you have to go around one of the outside marks in order to start your race. If this is you, right, you're not allowed to duck and then go back up. That's not allowed. If you are over right here, you have to go all the way around, and black flag's not, or eye flag's not there, and then continue sailing. And that, like I said, will be a little flag they put up. And just keep an eye out for that. You're always looking at the committee boat to see what race course is up, what flags and stuff like that. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. Like,
Can I add to that?
please do, please do.
This applies within the entire final minute of the starting sequence. So if you're over early within a minute, you have to do this. There's no getting around that.
Correct. Yes. And like Kai said, there are no black flags. It's a pretty good show though, so might be worth seeing. Any other questions or things I'm forgetting? Again, sorry, there's a lot of information.
I have a question, Corey.
Yes, go for it.
Are there any good indicators that I can see on my boat about which side of the line to start on?
There's sails. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. Well, how do I check them?
Yeah, I'll do that in a second. Let me pull this back up. All right, yeah. So that is a great question. Let me show you how you guys can figure out where to start on the line. So once again, let's say we have our line here and I want to know where to start. And let's say there's a slight shift like that. Race, again, a little exaggerated, but race committee was struggling this morning to set it up. And so let's say I'm sailing along and I do not have a wind indicator like big boats do to look up at, and I want to figure out where to start on the line, right? Or how to start, I guess. If I'm over here, right, I'm going to be on my lifted tack right there. But given that angle, if I'm at this angle, not looking too good. So my right side's going to pay off. I'm thinking I want to start on the right. Okay. Well, how can I do that? I can set up at the line and I can do what's called luff my sails. I can point directly into the wind just like that. And I can luff my sails. And when they are perfectly, when I'm perfectly straight in the wind, they'll be luffing and they're not going to be filling on either side. And when I do that, I know my boat is pointed directly at the wind. So if I am luffing my sails and it's not pointed directly up the course, I know there's a slight skew, and that's something I can keep in mind at my start, which is half of what, like I said, half of what sailing races are, is being able to determine tactics before it starts. Yeah. Did I answer your question? Cool. Anything else?
I have a quick question.
Go for it.
So as crew, what can we do to support our skipper during a start, whether that be pumping the boat or putting ourselves in a better position during the start and during the starting sequence, so that we're ready to go when the time comes?
It's a great question. Great question. So I like to say that the crew, or at least when I try to be crew, try to be the eyes for your skipper. Of course, they are the one driving, but just be as helpful as you can with information. I think there's rarely ever a time where you're giving too much information. You know, I'm, at least when I'm a crew, you know, the skippers drive and they don't want to be looking at their watch. So I'm counting down. I generally give them 15-second intervals of updates on the time. You know, I'll let them know, oh, it's 2:30 now, 2:45, because they only happen every minute to 30 seconds on the horn. So I'm giving updates so that they know where to situate themselves, and how much time rather they have to situate themselves. Like any good crew, I'm always watching my weight and all that stuff. But I also like to let my skipper know where other boats are. Like, oh, you have one, you know, downwind of you on your left behind the jib. Watch out for that, just so I can avoid a collision and stuff like that. But yeah, just giving them updated, seeing what you see on the water. Let them know if you're seeing more wind on one side than the other, if you're seeing a shift. Just because the skipper's driving, it's not their job to do the decision making. It's a group effort. Talk it out after your race is over, you know, talk about how it went, what you could have done differently, what went wrong, or keep an eye on the other boats, the ones that got first place. What did they do? Why did that work for them? Stuff like that. Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks, Corey.
Can I add to this?
What's that?
Can I add to this?
Yes, please do.
So for skippers, this communication channel goes both ways. Especially if you're sailing with an inexperienced crew. As a skipper, you need to just basically always be talking. Like any thought that you have in your head, you need to just say it. Because otherwise your crew, like if you have an experienced crew, your crew is going to know what's going on. But if you don't have an experienced crew, they're going to be like, well, we're here, but why are we here? And they're not going to get better if you're not talking. And they're also not going to know to like anticipate attack or a jibe, or, you know, where you're going to be starting on the line if you're not telling them that information. Especially if you want to go fast, if you want to go slow, like if you want them to luff, like that information needs to be super fast as well. Where you want their weight, that kind of thing.
Yeah, awesome. Anything else? I know we have a intramural game starting in 20 minutes. I want to make sure everyone can get to if they would like to. I think I got everything in the chat.
Who's gonna be there? I'll be there.
Yeah,
I'll be there.
Yeah, I unfortunately won't be able to, but I highly recommend. But if that's everything, I'll stop sharing. And thank you guys for coming. Hopefully I will see you on the water or at a meeting soon. And good luck with school.